Okay, as I mentioned the last time, we kind of talked about your family history and a little bit about the politics of what was going on at that time. And I think this time we're going to start talking about some of the, as Paul mentioned, Paul Williams. He's going to be assisting me with this effort in terms of the different eras going back to when you initially started serving in the Illinois General Assembly. So, Paul, you're going to kind of help me out with this.
I wanted to identify, probably starting around the years 1965 to about 1980. I'm going to try to cover that general time period.
Okay.
So just think about, at that time, what ward were you involved with, and who was the leader of the ward at the time, and what was going on in about late 1960s, early 70s?
Well, in the late 60s, around 67, it was the 21st Ward, and we elected Wilson Frost, the alderman of that ward, and I became his secretary. And in that capacity, I served as secretary until I was elected to state representative in 1972. The 21st Ward was a new ward as far as blacks were concerned. So we had put together an organization and elected Wilson Frost. And it was not one of those wards like in the city, the 3rd Ward, the 5th Ward, the 8th Ward, where it wasn't a hand-me-down ward. It wasn't a ward that the whites moved out, the blacks took over. We built that ward organization on our own. So in 1972, when I was first elected, Wilson Frost had become the committeeman of the ward, and Gene Barnes was the state representative. So right after redistricting, Gene didn't believe he could win in the new state representative seat, so he decided to run in the seat further north. And so the 19th Ward, the 21st Ward, and the 9th Ward, Wilson Frost and I sat down with the 19th Ward, and they decided to select me for state representative in that district. And there were many who believed that I could not win the seat, and because Gene Barnes felt he could not win it. But what I had going for me is that I grew up in the ward. I grew up in the Morgan Park community, and my father had been active in 19th Ward politics. So I had a strong political base. Matter of fact, Jerry Shea was then the Democratic leader in the Illinois House of Representatives, and they tried to get me off the ballot.
Was it still when they had the three members?
Three members, right. They tried to get me off the ballot. They didn't want me to run because they wanted to be sure 2 Democrats won.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the other Democrat in that district with you at the time?
Houlihan. Dan Houlihan.
Okay.
Dan Houlihan was my running mate. And the only incumbent in the district was a Republican named Ted Meyer, and his running mate was Bob Dunn. So, in 3-member district, they had bullet voting. And in the Beverly Hills area, Dunn, Meyer, and Houlihan lived within 3 blocks of each other. So I knew if I could solidify the base of black voters in the district, and we had what you call bullet voting. I mean, a voter could give 1, 2, or 3 votes to one candidate.
Okay.
So this was the first time this district had been drawn? This is the first?
Yeah.
They just drew this district?
Yeah, just drew it.
Okay. And when they drew it, they would, I would assume, trying to maximize the blacks, and they were starting the concept of putting in a few blacks to make it Democrats, and then taking some suburban areas. And so
Yes.
you were first black running in that whole area.
I was the first black. Gene Barnes could have ran in the district, but he chose not to run the district because he felt a black could not get elected. So I ran and I won. I won by more than 10,000 votes. And Houlihan was bullet voting in the 19th Ward,
Mm-hmm.
And I bullet voted in the, it was then the 34th Ward. And
what do you mean?
getting all 3 votes.
Right.
Have a voter vote, give you all 3 votes. And I won overwhelmingly, 10,000 votes. The incumbent, Ted Meyer, felt so sure of his victory that he reached back to help his running mate. And his running mate beat him out.
Oh, and who was his running mate?
Bob Dunn.
Oh, Bob Dunn, okay.
And Bob Dunn won, he lost.
Oh.
And so that was my first election. But I had a strong base from which to run from.
Okay.
Now, at that time, you were originally in the 21st. Where was the 34th?
It was created when they, after redistricting, they created the 34th Ward.
Okay, and in that ward, because then Wilson switched from the 21st
to 34.
Okay.
Right.
And so you basically were part of the creation, in one sense, of both wards.
Yes, I recall the telephone call that came in. Jerry Shea had gone to Mayor Daley to try to change the nomination process. And it's because the commitment, Tom Fitzpatrick in the 9th Ward and Wilson Frost, they had the most votes, so the two got together. They slated Dan Hines and they slated Emil Jones. And Mayor Daley called Wilson Frost in. And Wilson Frost said, no, we've gotten our petitions out and whatnot. We're sticking with our candidate and we're going to win. And we did win. And some of the other black commitment in the city, Sawyer in the 6th Ward, Benny Stewart, the commitment, and Alderman of the 21st Ward, they were upset that we had 2 state representatives coming out of our 34th
Out of 34th,
Ward.
okay.
Okay, was you and Gene?
No, Gene Barnes.
Okay.
And they ran to the mayor trying to say, well, they got 2, but we built this on our own. And that's how we ended up having 2 elected state representatives out of our organization. The Stewarts and the others were waiting on orders from Mayor Daley, who was the party chair. And we, out there, since we weren't waiting on the orders, we just went ahead and took it. And that's how I ended up winning.
Now, was Gene Barnes always from the 34th Ward, or where was he? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, he got elected in 1970.
Okay.
And then, right after his election, during that period, they redistricted. And he felt that running in Mount Greenwood, parts of Evergreen Park, Calumet, Blue Island, that the district was too overwhelmingly white.
It wasn't winnable. Yeah.
And so when I ran, it was only about 23% black in the district. And they felt a black Democrat couldn't win. But what Houlihan did was he took all the votes out of the 19th Ward. He didn't leave
it split with Myers and anybody else.
Right. I didn't mind that. I didn't mind that because as long as he got the votes, it didn't bother me.
Right.
And so I took all the votes in the 34th Ward, and we split the 9th Ward, and that's how I was able to win.
So okay. Now, back when you mentioned that Mayor Daley was the mayor at the time, what was your, when you went to Springfield and what was your relationship, or what was the relationship with the mayor's office at that time?
Well, the mayor at that time, the Democrats who were based out of Chicago and some in Cook County, but mostly Chicago, they took their directions from the Mayor Daley. He would call, tell them what issues, he would like the vote to be, and that's the way it was. I was a little different in that I was new, and even though I belonged to the organization, I was not an integral part of that. And so we were more or less, let's say, mavericks, I said, to a certain degree. Even though I supported the organization, most of the issues and things that impacted the city, but theirs were all on orders from the
City
boss.
Hall, okay.
City Hall.
Now, when you first went there, who were some of the ideally, at that time, who were some of the official leaders for the city? Like, Jerry Shea and
You had Jerry Shea there. Mike Madigan was in the House leader. Then you had the Deacon Cornel Davis. He was there. Ray Ewell was there. Hal Washington was there. They were all there in the House when I first got there.
As well as some people like Caldwell.
And Louis Caldwell was there.
And Newhouse, was he?
Yeah, he was in the Newhouse was in the Senate.
Oh, okay.
And in the House, they had formed the group Black Caucus together. Cornel Davis was considered the leader. And I came into all of that with experience in working in city government, so I knew how city government and state government meshed together. So it was not a situation where I was naive about the operations of government. But on various issues and things that came down, they generally took their orders from City Hall.
Now, you said you were with the city. Where were you? You had been with the city prior to that?
Yeah, I was the secretary to Alderman Wilson Frost.
Okay.
And I ran the political organization when it became the 34th Ward. And I was the organization secretary as well. And so I ran the political operation for the 34th Ward back then.
As being the secretary had that much?
Yeah, I ran, you had patronage back then, jobs and that, so I handled all of that for the 34th Ward. And I gave it up when I became a state representative. But I knew how it all worked.
Yeah. Now, when you got there, what was your impressions of, you talked about the Cornel Davises and the Fred Smiths. What was your impressions of the, I won't call them the Black Caucus, but just as the black members in relation to the
number one,
operation?
most of them relegated themselves to the social issues and welfare and public aid, at that time. The best advice I had when I first got there came from Raymond Ewell, state representative. And he told me, he said, since you pick your seats in the House, he said, pick your seat next to a downstate legislator, not those from Chicago or those who look like you. But when you do that, it will enable you to establish a relationship with someone from a different region, which can help you down the road and also help them. And that's what I did. I sat next to a guy named Bill Harris from Marion, Illinois, and Clarence Darrow from Rock Island. And we became good friends. But I learned about their communities. Clarence Darrow ended up having the best civil rights voting record because he sat next to me.
Because he understood what you were going through.
Right.
Yeah.
And I learned all about the coal mines down in southern Illinois, the farms from Bill Harris. And we became very, very close. So when you establish those type relationships, then you find some things you have in common. They were all concerned about employment, education, and families and things of that nature. And that's what I did, basically. I hung with them. The Ray said, don't let them stick you on those welfare committees. They always throw all the blacks on welfare and everything. And so I got on committees that dealt with insurance and pensions and things of that nature. And it broadened my perspective about government and government's role and everything like that.
Who was the speaker when you first?
Well, the first speaker was a Republican named Bob Blair. And the downstate coalition, when the Democrats took over, they wanted Clyde Schultz to be the speaker. He was something like a leader down there, but after going through several ballots, I believe that was after the Democrats had a big sweep in 1974, Democrats elected 101 members. But that was
177 back then.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
And
Before the
so
redistricting.
after many ballots, Schultz could not make it. Couldn't get enough votes. So the orders came from City Hall to switch. And they switched their allegiance from Clyde Schultz to Bill Redmond.
Oh, okay.
And but some of the downstairs, along with a couple of the blacks, Ray Ewell was one of them, they stuck with Clyde Shope. That's when they cut a deal with the Republicans to come over to give the Democrats enough votes to elect the speaker. And but the orders came from on high.
Yeah.
Right, that was what's his name actually? Lee Daniels got in trouble because he switched.
Lee Daniels was the first one. He and Redmond were from DuPage County, so Lee Daniels was the first person to switch, but he was not part of the deal, so he threw him off guard. And so, but all the loyalty and the votes coming down for Clyde Shope changed just like that. One telephone call, all of those changed.
So back then, Mr. Clyde had been, like you said, the downstate leader. I guess Jerry Shea was sort of the city leader. How was Jerry Shea
Jerry Shea was a very knowledgeable leader, and there were times during that period that he and I had our differences on certain issues, and you had a governor by the name of Dan Walker, whom the city was against.
Yeah.
And the city was against him. I recall he had legislation for the governor's action office, and no one down there would sponsor it. So I took the sponsorship of it because that was, in my opinion, that was a lack of leadership for the blacks. So that legislation gave me a chance, I felt, to assume the leadership. And I recall trying to pass that bill, and it came up a few votes short, and I put it on postponed consideration. And I had some personal problems back home, so I had to leave. And when I came back, then the mayor himself, or his operatives, began to call a lot of the Chicago legislators to pull them off the bill. I recall sitting in my seat, and Cornel Davis came by and said to me, he said, "Please don't call that bill, because if you call it, I'm going to have to get up and speak against you and vote against it." And then there were other legislators from the Chicago area, they were almost ignoring me. It passed by me. This one said, so I called a couple of them over. I said, "Did you get a call?" They said, "Yes, I got a call." So they followed the orders, you know. And so eventually the bill did not pass. So when session was over with, I also had a job working for the city. And I had to go in and see Mayor Daley. And so when I went to see Mayor Daley, Wilson Frost was with me. And Daley had a list of bills by number on his desk. And he began to question me as to why I voted a certain way on certain of those bills. He knew what each of those bills did for the city of Chicago, as well as each bill on the political side. He knew by number. And he talked to me. He asked about the governor's action office bill. He said, "Why did you vote?" I said, "I'll sponsor the bill. I got to vote for my own bill." And he said, "Why is that bill?" He said, "Don't you know that guy's against us?" I said, "Well, in my opinion, he's not really, because you got a lot of folks in my community working the governor's actions office and so forth and things." We had a long discussion. And then he said, I forget, he said to me, I said, "No one told me that." He asked me, "How long you been in politics?"
That's what he asked you. Right.
And I told him, he said, "Well, you know." He was right on that point. But what happened is that it was either Jerry Shea or Mike Madigan who gave him that information. So I found out, it turned out to be Mike Madigan was the one that did that. that gave him.
So going way back,
to how I was voting on issues out there. Yes. So that's how they played the game.
Oh, wow. Now, you mentioned Walker. What was your overall? Because like you said, it was very contentious.
Right.
Walker and
see, Walker be hollered out for the Democratic nomination to run for governor.
And where was Walker from? I'm just curious.
I don't recall. Suburbia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, he wasn't from Chicago.
Yeah,
okay.
he had written that report on the riots, the Democrat convention. Walker. So he was a populist governor. The guy elected governor. And but there was conflict between the governor's office and City Hall. They didn't get along. And so they were doing everything they could possibly to screw the governor.
Okay.
And see, the governor's action office had a lot of blacks in the office working there, doing different things. And our action office had offices in a lot of the wards in the city, not to be political, but to just help people with community problems and so forth. And a lot of folks didn't like that, But it didn't bother me, basically, So, but on the political side, they didn't like that. And I saw it was a lack of leadership, and I felt that was a means to seize the leadership and move in that direction, see. And that's what happened.
What was your impression of some of the other people that you were serving with, say like Cornell Davis or that sort of,
Well, Cornell Davis was a good leader, but he was more or less on the social issue in the civil rights era back then. And but having real power, they did not have. I saw that they did not have, because I challenged the leadership about blacks working on staff, and I soon saw how they operated, a lot of the blacks, and I brought a black down to be hired and sent him over to the Senate to work. Then I recall Jim Taylor found out about it. He jumped up and blocked. He wanted to put his own, but that's where Gary McCants came from.
Right, I remember, right. Gary was
okay.
Right.
Yeah, see, Gary McCants, and called Tom Hines became president. But he was my senator in my district, and so I challenged them about blacks working in the clerk's office, and challenged them, well, others would not speak out on those issues. But I questioned them about how come you haven't I got school kids coming down here from my district, and you look up here, everything is really white. So that's the problem I had in dealing with them. They felt I shouldn't say those things.
That was around the mid-'70s. I remember.
Right.
I came down, one of the
Frank Williams was down there too?
Frank Williams came back. Actually, Frank Williams is...
I brought Frank Williams down.
Oh.
Right. Frank Williams was one of the earliest ones who came down.
Right.
I was there as an intern. I got through the school. Gene Barnes helped me come, and Frank was there, and he came because he was from the 34th or 19th Ward.
Yeah.
And now, thinking of that, now at that time, what about Partee? Because he was over in the Senate. But he was around during those years. He was probably the most prominent of
he was most prominent of the black lawmakers in Springfield. I didn't have that much interaction with him. But I knew he was, the president of the Senate. And he got to that position by default, more or less.
And how is that?
Because the nominee to be the president, the proposed was a guy by the name, I think his name was Bob Sherry. But Dick Newhouse held out and wouldn't support Sherry, so you had Senator Chew, Senator Fred Smith, Kenny Hall, and Partee, by Newhouse holding out, the Democrats couldn't put together enough votes. They couldn't deal with the Republicans. Then the Republicans could be, and you had people like Charlie Chu who made cut the deal. So then the orders again came on high and told the Democrats to get behind Partee. That's how Partee was president of the Senate. See? And
looking at some of that thing, because you got Part Two. What about Charlie Chu? Everybody was a flamboyant.
Charlie Chu was flamboyant. Charlie Chu had the nerve of steel. Charlie Chu would say and do things. And Charlie Chu helped break down a lot of the racial barriers down in Springfield back then by his action and his association with his women friends and so forth.
Okay.
And so Charlie was one who would speak his mind, speak openly, wouldn't be ashamed, you know, and he was respected. And there were other lawmakers. I give a lot of credit to Raymond Ewell.
Mm-hmm.
He was more progressive, and he understood the process, how it worked more or less, and how you can be effective in that body.
Mm-hmm.
And there was always internal fights between like Jim Taylor and Harold Washington.
Yeah, talk about Harold a little bit.
See,
Yeah.
Harold liked to served together with them in the House, but when I mentioned the bullet voting, see, Harold Washington and Jim ran in the same district. So what happened is, what caused the feud between the two of them is that Jim Taylor lost that primary election to a woman by the name of Peggy Smith Martin.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why he lost is because you have agreement between your running mate that you will split the vote 1.5 each.
Mm-hmm.
But Harold Washington bulleted it, got all 3 votes out of the 20th ward, and Jim Taylor was not bulleting, and so he lost to Peggy Smith Martin. So Jim was hot about that. And that's when Jim ran as an independent and got elected, and the two never got along. They never got along.
Oh.
That was classic. Even when I was there, when we were staff, you either had to be back then
with Harold or with Jim.
With Harold or with Jim Taylor. You had to be against it. Hard.
And so when Cecil Partee,
he left to run for Attorney General.
He ran for Attorney General and lost, but his Senate seat was open, and Harold Washington went to the Senate.
Oh, okay.
But the two still feuded, see. So in politics as it goes, Harold Washington ran and went on to Congress, but Harold Washington didn't want Jim Taylor to succeed him in the Senate. And Harold Washington, when he ran for election for the state Senate, Jim Taylor ran an unknown, I forget the person's name, Clarence Berry.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Now, Clarence Berry came within less than 200 votes of beating Harold Washington for the Senate. The person that saved Harold Washington's Senate run was Cecil Partee in the 20th ward. And but Clarence Berry nearly won. And so, after serving the Senate, then Harold went on to run for Congress. But that fight between the two was so intense. So in 1979, when Jane Byrne ran for mayor, Jim Taylor was with the organization, and Blandick lost. To Jane Byrne.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim Taylor became her deputy mayor and so forth, and things like this. And
that's when he got there, because he moved over to the Senate.
Jim Taylor did.
Taylor moved over to, after Harold went to Congress.
Yeah, Jim
Harold didn't have Harold, but it was a committeeman's pick. And Harold couldn't stop it because he had control of the 16th ward.
Yeah. So Jim.
So he got Harold.
So that's how Jim went to the Senate. But in 1983, when Harold ran for mayor, of course Jim was going to be with Byrne. And for many of the black lawmakers, Jim called a meeting, and he put out a press release saying the black members are with Jane Byrne, or use all our names and whatnot. So, and of course, Harold Washington won the election, and Jim ended up being on the outs. But that's all the internal politics amongst the blacks down there. And we had our fights in the House, too. I had my fight with Jim Taylor. Not Jim Taylor, but you had the Equal Rights Amendment in the 70s. And some of the advocates for the Equal Rights Amendment, Jim Taylor had never voted for ERA. And to get his vote, they said they were going to help get him the leadership spot of Cornel Davis, who was retiring. Cornel was assistant majority leader. And we felt that was wrong.
Right.
But they would not publicly say they were not doing that, so therefore, when the Equal Rights Bill came up, 5 of us did not vote. It was myself, Gene Barnes, I don't know who else, maybe been Caldwell, but we did not vote for it.
Was Kenny Hall in the House at the time?
No, he was in the Senate.
Okay.
And so we had banded together, and the organization was pushing the ERA amendments hard. I mean, the local politicians, Mayor Daley and all the folks.
Phyllis Schlafly. Yeah.
I remember that 5 years. I think Louis wasn't Ray one?
Ray may have been one, too.
It was Ray, 'cause
and we were not fighting over the spot. We were fighting over their interference in the internal politics. It went beyond when they got involved in who was going to be the leader for the black. We pick our own leader.
And that's so you were the one who basically started that everybody got to pick their own leader then. So that's where that came from. But the white media try to say we fighting over a spot. No, we were fighting over the spot. We were fighting on the right to choose our leader, and you have no right to come in and try to pick our leader for us. Yeah, so that fight went on. Even though I was part of the organization, I did not agree always with the organization. And we built a political ward organization. We elected state representative. We had a county commissioner. We had Wilson Frost as alderman, and we built that on our own. We didn't wait for the organization. Okay, you're going to get this spot. We went out and took it.
Almost like self-empowerment at that time. Yeah.
Well, things was because at that time, I guess they were just starting some degree of independence. Because I guess you'd had Judge Cousins over got elected. Charlie Truitt got elected as an alderman.
They were independents back then, see. But Chew became a great organization man afterwards.
Okay.
And Cousins was an alderman here. But in Springfield, most of the state representatives came out of political organization. So Harold Washington was the organization guy.
Right.
He came out of the 20th Ward and 3rd Ward. He was an organization guy. He was no independent.
Exactly.
Right. See.
He didn't even describe himself as independent.
And so that's how and had not been for the organization, he would never been a state senator, and he would have never gotten the position where he could run for Congress. So there was the organization that helped Harold Washington.
Although you had the perception he was an independent, and so that was not.
No, that was not true. Yeah, he broke with the organization, but he was not an independent.
What about guys like Louis Caldwell, Jesse Madison?
Well, Jesse Madison was more independent. Louis Caldwell was somewhat independent because he represented the area over there.
On the South Shore.
Right.
Hyde Park almost, right.
Yeah, so he was somewhat sort of independent in thinking and everything. And Ray Ewell came out of the 17th Ward, but Ray Ewell was part of the organization, but then too, like myself, was outspoken on many issues and things that we advocated for and we fought for. you could be part of the organization, but you had to be a lapdog.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we went through all of that. Yes.
What about some of the other, just thinking about some of the other people that was prominent during that time, like Mayor Belander? Could you have any, because I don't really remember a whole lot about Belander.
No, he was just, see, at the time, my Alderman Camille Wilson Frost was President Pro Tem of the City Council. So if you recall, when Richard J. Daley died, there was those touting him as the black mayor. But the law, as it relates to secession, was unclear. It didn't say who the person shall be. And so he ended up not getting to be mayor. And it was a great lesson to observe what really went down, is that 'cause I was involved in that. The Tom Donovan, who was the mayor's chief of staff, when Daley died, those aldermen had been so accustomed to taking orders that Tom Donovan was able to call those aldermen and tell them who to vote for. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
And because they had
They weren't used to
they had not been accustomed to acting and thinking on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So, because the structure of local government in the city of Chicago is strong council, weak mayor.
Mm-hmm.
What Daley had done, he had usurped the power of the council, where he became strong and they became weak. So when he died, they had all the power, but they didn't know they had the power. So Tom Donovan could easily tell them who to vote for. That's how Blandick ended up being mayor. When Harold Washington died, the aldermen realized they had the power. And
They had
so,
eye openers, huh?
that's right. And so when the late Mayor Washington's staff tried to call the aldermen together for a meeting, they wouldn't appear because they had the power.
Mm-hmm. And knew it.
And knew they had the power. And so, but one thing is a good lesson in that you always treat people nice. I'm talking about the staff. The staff, when late Mayor Daley was in power, Tom Donovan, they treated the aldermen nice. So when the mayor died, it was easy for him to, because he'd been kind to them all along. It was just the opposite under Harold Washington. The staff treated the aldermen like they were nothing.
Oh.
So they couldn't talk to the aldermen when Harold Washington died.
Remember the big fights going
Yeah.
on.
So I mean, when I said treat, especially the black aldermen in the eyes of staff were nothing. They got, mayor. And so that's what happened.
Mm-hmm. A lot of friction.
Yeah. See, so I recall when the Grimshaws and them tried to call those aldermen, they just ignored them because they were treated bad by her when the mayor was alive. But had they been real kind to them, treated them, and got what they wanted, then they're more easily for them to help bring about transition support. But that was the key reason why.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what about Mayor Byrne? What was your impression of her?
Well, she was a flash in the pan, more or less. Confrontational. Did a lot of things that caused it. Now, had Mayor Byrne solidified her base, but the big mistake that she made, she went for a very narrow vote. You had the Betty Bono and some other woman that were fighting school desegregation. And she ended up going with that group over the masses of blacks who helped elect her. Mm-hmm. And she put some of them, I think she put some on the school board.
Right, that's right. Yeah, I remember that.
And then she took that Caruso woman from the school and put her over with CHA. And that angered the black constituency.
Mm-hmm.
She went after a narrow vote and blew her base vote. But had not she done that, well, been no way for Harold Washington to beat her.
Mm-hmm.
So she actually solidified the black community for Harold Washington.
By alienating them.
That 3 vote, because it was Harold, I think, Daly, and Byrne.
Yeah.
They would split the white vote, and Harold won that Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
What about, you talked about your early years in Springfield. What was it like being in those days just an African American involved with a process that really wasn't that open to you guys?
It wasn't that open, but you had to make your own way in getting things accomplished. And I learned that quickly once I got there, is that the things that you try to push, you have to make your own way to get it done.
Now, did this require a lot of coalition building in order to
Yes,
get
you had
that?
to build a coalition. I had great support amongst downstate legislators. And you had the liberal wing of the Democrat Party. And but just being an effective member of the body, we when we put Gene Barnes in as chairman of the Appropriation Committee, and we felt that was a means with which we can began to funnel resources to our community. That's when we made a vow to adopt Chicago State University and make sure it gets its fair share of the funding and things. We did that way back then. That started the process moving us in that direction. So as chairman of the Appropriation Committee, you have control of the process and the money, you know where it's going. So that's what we use that for.
This is what, in the 70s?
It began in the 70s.
Okay.
And so all the things that we've done for the university, the genesis of it goes way back to when we sat down one day and adopted the university and began to work toward help get the resources necessary to make